is Jenny Nordine. I am an occupational therapist, and I own a private practice called Driving to Independence. What we do in general, and I can give you more detail out at our table, is assess individuals for their driving safety. We do a clinical assessment and a behind-the-wheel assessment that I'm going to give you some detail on once we get going this morning or later in my presentation. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer any detailed questions you might have. So the title of our talk today is Driving Dilemma, How to Evaluate for Driving Safety. So I really wanted to start this off, and again, sort of dovetailing from Dr. Spahn, is why do we drive? Why is this such a big deal? And really, it's all of our independence, our mobility, our freedom, and our ability to socialize. So whether you're 16 or 86, all of those things are really, really important to us. So what are the skills that we need to drive? And he's given you a nice list of those things, and we've got them all here. In general, I would tell you that we've got vision issues that we need to look at, cognition, and of course, motor function. So all of those things have to work in conjunction with each other in order to be a safe driver. I'm going to focus today on some cognitive issues and of course specifically memory. But again, what does aging, how does aging affect our ability to drive? In general, muscle weakness. He talked a bit about sensation as well. I would agree with that. Decreased range of motion, visual acuity and visual fields, contrast sensitivity, and then cognition, including all of these areas. Memory, that I'm going to talk about specifically today, selective and divided attention, speed of their decision making, judgment, prioritization of information, and problem solving. So how does memory affect driving? So short-term memory, briefly, is sort of the brain's post-it note. The brain processes, the process of temporarily storing small bits of information for a very short amount of time, typically 15 to 30 seconds. So an example would be, I'll change lanes as soon as the blue car on my left passes. 15 seconds later, you've forgotten that decision or that thought that you had, and so you never change lanes. Once a short-term memory is rehearsed, it can move into long-term memory. So, for instance, repeating a phone number. That's why we do that. We repeat a phone number over and over and over again, and eventually we put it into our long-term memory. I had somebody on Facebook the other day put out a thing that said, how many of you can remember the phone number that you had when you were a child? And it was shocking how many people said yes. So if short-term memory is not rehearsed in some way, it will move out of that 30-second window and be forgotten. So how does short-term memory affect driving? So again, the brain's post-it notes. And so these are the specific driving examples that I can give to you that if somebody has a short-term memory issue, how it's going to affect their ability to drive. Forgetting to buckle a seatbelt. Recalling the posted speed limit, the difficulty in recalling the posted speed limit 15 to 30 seconds after you just passed it. Where was I going to go on my first on my list of errands? So you've got even if it's a mental list, you need to go to the grocery store, you need to go to the bank, and you need to get your hair cut. But you get into the car, and 15 seconds later, you don't remember what that list was or where you were headed to first. Passing a cyclist in the bike lane and forgetting that he was there and then making an immediate right-hand turn onto a side road. Yeah. Checking a blind spot for a lane change, but 15 seconds later not recalling what was in that blind spot and going ahead and making a lane change. Using a turn signal, but forgetting what you were going to do. Change lanes, turn right, turn left. What were you about to do with regard to that turn signal? And then passing an intended turn and becoming lost. So Dr. Spahn, again, sort of referred to the fact that changes in a specific route or a well-known route can really throw somebody off. So long-term memory. These are memories that will last, that are from a few days ago, years ago, or forever ago. So all memories are not created equal. Strong memories will recall an event a procedure or a fact on demand. You know what year you were born. That's a long-term memory. It's a fact that you can recall at any moment. A weak memory can still be a long-term memory, but it needs some sort of a cue in order to bring it to the forefront of your head. What your anniversary date might be. You know that you know it, but you need to, it was in July, for instance. Oh yeah, okay. And so a weaker memory may need some sort of a cue. So related to long-term memory, again, what are our driving-specific effects on, what are the long-term effects of long-term memory on driving? The location of the pedals or the turn signal. So I've had people get to my car before during a driving assessment and tell me my car is very different from theirs. Because in their car, the right turn signal's on the right and the left turn signal's on the left. Never been a car made that's been like that. But that's their long-term memory. That's a lack of long-term memory. Remembering which pedal is which, right or left pedal. Which one's the accelerator? Is it on the right or the left side in your car? Rules of the road. Being able to know that at a yellow light, you need to stop. You don't need to accelerate. Okay? Defensive driving techniques. What do you do if somebody has a turn signal on in the lane next to you and you're in quite a lot of traffic? What would be your defensive driving technique? You might back away, exactly, or maybe speed up to get out of their way. Whatever is going to be most appropriate, but that's your defensive driving technique that you may have lost with a long-term memory deficit. Navigation to a specific destination. So again, if there's road construction that is a problem, or maybe there's a car accident at that intersection, being able to recall an alternate route in order to get to that same destination. Again, your list of errands to complete, maybe in what order they are, but even where you are headed. So you get into the car and you head out, and there's one route to get out of your neighborhood, and you get to that stop sign, and you're not sure what you're doing out there. Where was I headed when I left the house today? The location of construction. Maybe you're familiar with the fact that they're repaving Bell Road and they've been doing it for months and you need to avoid it. But today your long-term memory prohibits you from remembering that major construction is going on. And then the most efficient route to take for multiple errands. So, the grocery store is closest to your home, but you may not go to the grocery store first if you also have to go and get your hair cut, because you're not going to leave those groceries in the car while you're in getting your hair cut. Okay, so what would be the most efficient way to be able to get these activities done? So the Clinician's Guide to Assessing and Counseling the Older Driver is a publication that has actually has sort of moved around. It originally was published by the American Medical Association. It's now been taken over by the American Geriatric Society. And so the Clinician's Guide to Counseling the Older Driver is a large book or document. It's like 312 pages. So look it up. It's easily found if you look it up online. Don't hit print unless you are ready to get your 312 pages. But two really important items that are included in the Clinician's Guide are, am I a safe driver and is my loved one a safe driver? And so I include it here to make sure that we sort of have an idea of indications that you may not be a safe driver, or things that your loved one may be mentioning to you that we'll get to here in a second. So as you sort of assess yourself, think about these questions. I get lost while driving. Okay? My friends and family members say they are worried about my driving. So you may be a confident driver, but if multiple people are saying that they're concerned about your driving, then that requires some introspection. Other cars seem to appear out of nowhere. Others drive too fast. Other drivers honk at me. So I was sharing stories earlier out here, and we had this issue with my grandmother a number of years ago, and this was one that she came up with. People, I don't know what's wrong with people out there. They're always honking. You know what? It's been a long time since somebody's honked at me. Not that I don't hear people honk and things, but if people are honking at you and looking at you in the driver position and things like that, there, again, some introspection may need to occur, because typically people don't honk a great deal, at least here. Other cities maybe. But if you're feeling like you're getting honked at a lot, there very well could be an issue. Driving stresses me out. And in conjunction with that, after driving, I feel tired. So that fatigue that somebody is experiencing is the stress that they're experiencing when driving. So if you get home from a list of errands and you just feel exhausted, then that could be stress that you're feeling while you're out driving. And I've had more near misses lately. Again, continuing on, I don't like driving at night. Now, we could get into the physiological reasons that driving at night begins to decline actually at about the age of 35. I'm sorry to say, because I'm older than 35, but driving at night is significant. And you need to think about what nighttime driving is defined as. And I actually asked the Motor Vehicle Department this question recently. The motor vehicle defines nighttime driving as any time you would use your headlights. Okay, that's nighttime driving. Now, if it's noon in late July and we're having a monsoon and all those dark clouds come in and it becomes very dim in the afternoon, that's still considered nighttime driving. I have more trouble parking lately. Busy intersections bother me. Left-hand turns make me nervous. Now, this is one that I would congratulate you for sort of figuring out. Left-hand turns sort of make me nervous too. So there are a lot of people out in the world, especially in the valley here, that make a lot of right-hand turns. And you know what? That's fine. That's a mechanism of making sure that you're safe. So if you want to go out and make 3 right-hand turns instead of a left-hand turn, congratulations. I would encourage you to do that. The glare from oncoming headlights bothers me. My medication makes me dizzy or drowsy. Clearly, make sure any medication changes don't affect your ability to be safe on the road. I have trouble turning the steering wheel. I have trouble pushing down on the gas pedal or the brake pedal. So again, are we looking at weakness? Are we looking at some arthritis, some decreased range of motion in the joints? Those sorts of things. I have trouble looking over my shoulder when I back up. I have been stopped by the police for my driving recently. My grandmother did this. People no longer accept rides from me. That's a clue. So, the fact of the matter is that requires, they're not being mean just to decline a ride, but rather that's a clue to someone that they should be thinking again about their driving skills. So now we're going to look at, is your loved one a safe driver? So these are things that hopefully caregivers or children can glean information from and realize what's happening. So is your loved one a safe driver? Again, coming from the clinician's guide to assessing and counseling the older driver. They forget to buckle up. Even if they're a passenger in your vehicle, they're forgetting to buckle up. Does not obey stop signs or traffic lights. So if you're out driving with your spouse and you begin to notice that they do accelerate at those yellow lights or that they sort of glide through the stop signs, those are issues that can be addressed. They fail to yield the right of way. Drives too slowly or too quickly. Often gets lost even on familiar routes. Stops at a green light or at the wrong time. So this is a common one that we'll often see in driving assessments as well. They just identify the fact that the light is lit and they begin to brake and slow down even if it's a green light. Doesn't stop to notice other cars, walkers, or bike riders on the road. So if you've got a bicyclist in that bike lane, typically somebody would note that. Even if they stay in their lane, they'll tend to shift a little bit in that lane, but they'll want to identify the fact that cyclist is there. doesn't stay in his or her lane, is honked at or passed often, reacts slowly to driving situations. So maybe the light, you've stopped appropriately at a red light, the light turns green, we're still sitting here. The person slowly takes their foot off the brake and we start to go, but they never reach more than 20 miles an hour between now and the next traffic light. And makes poor driving decisions. So when might it be appropriate to seek a driving assessment? So there's really three main areas that I would talk about. If you're unsure as to the individual's skills or have seen signs of poor driving. So Dr. Spahn again earlier discussed how difficult a decision this is or how difficult of a conversation this is to have. So that may be a reason that you want to seek a driving assessment from a professional. The individual would like an independent opinion of their driving skills. They just plain old don't believe you. Or you just feel like, you know what? Fine, I may be unsafe, but I want a neutral third party to be able to have that conversation with and know that there's no other reason that might be, an extra agenda that might be influencing somebody's decision to ask you to stop driving. Or there may be a need to restrict driving to daytime driving only, a radius restriction around the home, or adaptive driving equipment may be helpful. So again, earlier with the concerns with sensation in feet, that might be a reason that we want to look at adaptive driving equipment. Although we're completely changing how somebody drives, and so we need to make sure that the cognition is there in order to learn this new trick, right? But being able to restrict somebody to a radius around their home could extend that independent driving skill for a period of time. It doesn't always have to be an all or nothing event. So how to discuss your concerns about driving. So Ellen with AARP and I talked about this just a little while ago, and I would refer you to her table. I've thrown her under the bus now. Don't give examples of poor driving while they're driving. For obvious reasons. Give examples of your concerns while you're at home. Those concerns could include dings in the car. When we do a driving assessment on somebody, we ask that they drive that individual's vehicle to our office so that we can look at the car. If all those dings are on one side or the other of the car, that's an indication of issues that they could be experiencing. A recent fender bender that that the individual came to you and said, you know what, I backed into, this car appeared out of nowhere in the parking lot at Walmart the other day, and I backed into it, that's where that dent came from. Well, if that happens a couple of times, we've got an issue here. Running stop signs again, or late braking. So late reaction to whatever issue, whatever they're being confronted with out on the road. Understand when you're having this conversation that driving is really important for independence and someone's self-esteem. Again, all those reasons, the mobility, the ability to socialize, those are the reasons that people want to be able to drive. Your loved one could be really defensive and get really upset when this conversation starts. So what is a driving assessment? What do we do during the day? Our driving assessment comes in a few different flavors, but I'm going to give you sort of the overall, the majority of the assessments that we do. And then later on the panel or out of the desk or at the table, I can give you some examples of other assessments as well. But an assessment will always include a clinical portion as well as a behind the wheel piece of that assessment. The clinical assessment in our office is going to go through medical history and driving goals, assessment of driver performance, which is a specific video that somebody watches, a vision assessment, visual perception assessment, strength, range of motion, and sensation, coordination, and cognition. So in each of those categories, there's specific things that we would look at. And depending on if somebody is showing issues in one area or another, then that will sort of lead us down that road, no pun intended, to be able to assess other things. But what this clinical assessment demonstrates for us is what we need to make sure that we're looking for out on the road. Because if an issue is identified in the clinic, we need to know how that's going to affect safety out on the road. Now, honestly, somebody could do quite poorly in our office, but if they demonstrate good driving skills out on the road, that's what I'm worried about. I'm not really sure if you can do paper and pencil tasks, but I want to make sure that I'm looking for those concerns out there on the road. So an on-road assessment, I want to clarify, is done in our vehicle. It cannot be done in yours. Again, my vehicle is no different than yours. It's a standard sedan. I shouldn't say it that way. It's a sedan with an automatic transmission. I said standard sedan once and somebody jumped up and said, I can't drive a stick shift. It's an automatic transmission. It's just a regular old four-door sedan. But it has a passenger side brake because apparently we've got a concern. And you know, that keeps my sanity. My family appreciates that. As well as the fact that the motor vehicle department has to license these vehicles, and it has extra car insurance on it because of what its purpose is. So the assessment is done in our vehicle. The road assessment is going to look at these different things: adherence to road and traffic rules, environmental awareness and your interpretation of what's going on in the environment, consistent use of visual, cognitive, physical, and behavioral skills. So earlier we talked about aggression or some issues related to mood control and things like that. We look for those things out on the road as well. Communication with other road users and cognitive and physical endurance. The assessment typically takes about 50 minutes, depending on traffic. There are 22 different driving skills that are assessed, and these are required by the motor vehicle department. So I've given you some examples here. We need to be on roads of varying speed limits, right and left turns at arrows, and when you have to yield to the traffic where there's no arrows giving you the right of way. We need to go through school zones. We do multiple lane changes. We go through a pedestrian congested area, et cetera, et cetera. So there's many of these, but they are typical driving scenarios. I'm not out there to trick you. That's not the goal that I'm after, but rather just making sure that whatever driving you're doing is safe to be doing. All right. Oh, there you go. Thank you very much.